Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 6th of June 2025. And my goodness, what a crazy time it is. I'm quite exhausted, I have to say. Can people stop doing crazy things, saying crazy things, bombing the crap out of each other, and just everyone take a chill pill? Okay, last night was pretty crazy, and I mean after all the Elon Musk, Donald Trump shenanigans. In terms of the war in Ukraine, we had the retaliation basically from Russia hitting Ukraine with as much as it could, I guess, and that's interesting in itself. We'll come to that in a while. We'll start with the hits and losses in terms of the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the list linked in the description below. 1,160 personnel lost, which is up from yesterday. We're now back comfortably over the 1,000 mark. We have 2 tanks and 5 AFVs, which I think signifies, a lack of that kind of equipment available to the Russians. They are still using quite a few vehicles and fuel tanks, vehicles, things like motorbikes and whatnot to do their attacks. 101 of those taken out in the last 24 hours. 44 artillery systems, that's double the daily average, and a wee bit more. 0 MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems. That's a good haul in that category. Don't know what they are. But yeah, so the figures are up in certain areas, down in others. I guess typical really for what we've seen over the last week or so. Right. Now, a few things concerning personnel losses. We're going to start with Andrew Perpetua, who says a number of Russian KIA that we see now is significantly lower than the peak we saw over the winter. And of course, over the winter, there were huge losses just in general. If we look at the Dell statistics for Russian losses for the course of this war, looking at the general staff figures over time, if we look at the AFVs over winter, we had a slight spike there. We have personnel losses, as according to the Ukrainians, going from 24 into 25. This is the peak. So that peak there, just above my beautiful spam forehead, that's your peak of losses as according to general staff. And this is what Andrew is saying, that there are far fewer deaths at the moment. But if the deaths are around here, if what he is seeing in terms of the videos that he observes on a daily basis, if what he is seeing is in line with the Ukrainian general staff, then that is still higher than much of the war. Well, that's what he says. So it's significantly lower than the peak we saw over the winter, but also significantly higher than what we saw last year. So giving last year is sort of this whole area here. Then if it's higher than that, but lower than the peak, then it's going to be sitting somewhere around here. So that's still incredibly high. And indeed, the daily numbers at the moment are fairly consistently above 1,000, and those are high numbers. Andrew then confirming those high numbers, but not the highest. We've gone from 50 to 70 per day, to 100 to 150 per day, and then back down to 80 to 100 per day. So what he's talking about is when he released the loss lists, those daily loss lists with all the different colors of stuff, and I know some of you really miss those. I miss those. He also released the personnel losses, which were, it's pretty macabre, but the number of Russian soldiers that he saw actually killed on these videos that he looks at every single day, and they totted them up, and it actually gave you a bit of a trend from what could be garnered from social media, and that trend had shot up. When he first started doing that, they were, as he says, 50 to 70 a day. And then when we were sort of last looking at his list a couple of months ago, where the losses were a lot higher, probably unsustainably high for him to keep doing it. 100 to 150 a day was where it was going, and then it's dropped back to 80 to 100 a day. Some days we dropped to 40, he said, which is odd, and other days it's like 130 to 150, so it balances out to be around 85 per day. So as macabre as that is an interesting statistic and probably tracks with the Ukrainian general staff figures as well. So it's always good when all the kind of the stars align and all the dots join up. Right, Andrew then shares this post, which I think is fascinating. So what's going on, and I will be doing a Frontline update today. I have to, it's going to be my next video. Sumy is looking really bad, where the Russians are attacking south of the border into Sumy, carrying on from where they pushed the Ukrainians out of Kursk. But then just to the side of there's Tekhino, which is this town just across the border where the Ukrainians had counterattacked, and they basically surrounded Tekhino. It's been ongoing for a long time now, it has to be said. But there are some pretty harsh messages coming out from the Russians in that area that it's not looking good for them. The Ukrainian aviation flies as if it were at home. Again, there are landings on positions in Tekhino, no air defense, no air cover. It's impossible to look at the map and draw a conclusion. It becomes outdated every 5 minutes. The situation is rapidly deteriorating. There are zero prerequisites for improvement. And yes, here is the border guard from hell writing about how our wounded lions are beating the enemy. That's true. The guards completely surrounded with their stomachs and legs pierced are holding their positions. That's true. But that's the tragedy. They shouldn't have found themselves in such a situation. It shouldn't have reached the point of heroism. Heroes need to be pulled out, not abandoned, saved, not written later that they held out until the end. The heroism of a soldier is a F up to you know who. So it's not looking good in Tekhino. Indeed, here's a Russian soldier reporting from Tekhino. Ukrainian forces have broken through to the center, encircling at least 2 Russian companies in a tightening ring. He admits that what they all fear, Ukrainian aviation, artillery and FPV drones, are hitting non-stop. So you can go and look at that, but that's basically a synopsis of what he says. So it's not looking good in Tekhino, even though just nearby in Sumy, the Russians are having their success there, although I don't think they've breached any major defensive lines at the moment. They're sort of working towards them, but I need to check that out later. Now, thanks to Colkhead Fella here for sharing this. So this is a Russian talking about Russia's meat waves are rotting on Zaporizhzhia's front. Let's go through what he says, this chap, and I'll read out the subtitles. Served in Rostov, Krasnomayskaya, 97, not a motorized rifle troops, but a volunteer. No, my position is at captain level, yes, but for us volunteers, there are no ranks. Name is Andre, just a bit tired, that's all. I'm on a shift. Yeah, I'm on duty at the position. No, I'm near Pyatikhatki, close by. So Pyatikhatki is near Kamyanska, right on what would be the eastern edge of the Zaporizhzhia reservoir. So the land that comes along meets the reservoir is kind of, the line is split by a sort of river where the Ukrainians have the north in Kamyanska and the Russians the south, and there's a village just to the east of Kamyanska that is called Pyatikhatki, where there's been quite a lot of fighting recently. So this is in the Zaporizhzhia direction. As he says, the terrain is tough, let's put it that way. If you move too fast, the losses will be huge. So that's interesting. So moving too fast leads to huge losses. The heights are all exposed, nowhere to hide. We walk in 5 or 6 kilometers to the zero line. So again, more confirmation that troops cannot get dropped off, rotated to the zero line. They have to be dropped off. He says 6 to 7 kilometers, we've heard previously, so 8 kilometers plus, and walking all the rest of the way. And that shows that drones really do control that corridor on the contact line. So he said drones and artillery. Listen, the old batch of mobilized guys, basically, they're all gone now. then I think he's answering questions, so I don't know what the questions are, but he says nope. If there are 20 or 30,000 left across the whole front, that's good. So in other words, well, out of 300,000. So basically, all of the original sort of mobilized lot have been killed. Just incredible. The old batch of mobilized guys, 30,000 left out of 300,000. He is saying that's how we advance, with sweat and blood. You don't need large forces. It's impossible to bring them in. We hold our position and build up strength over time. So the commanders say we have to take it. Damn, they keep sending in assaults one after another, group after group, just going in. They keep coming, endlessly coming. Losses, but most of the losses are convicts, mostly convicts. The first assault wave is convicts, and everyone else goes in after. Yeah, they go in, they take heavy losses, but they also get all sorts of perks because, well, honestly, it really messes them up. They drink. That's why there are losses. And the body armor, the Rachnik vests were sold off, and instead the Rachniks, they handed out cocoons which have lower protection. That's why there are injuries, deaths, and everything else. That's it. So he doesn't seem particularly happy. There are meat assaults that give consistent losses. The equipment is obviously substandard. Interesting that convicts are still being used to the degree that he's claiming. Whereas I would have thought they would have used most of the convicts up by now, but that's been going on since Bakhmut. But here the indication is that you still have the first wave being convicts, the Z stormtroopers, right? Okay, we have an FPV video here, which is from fiber optic in Horlivka area. So this is on the eastern front. Where I find this quite interesting. Like I find it fascinating watching stuff like this, going in and taking out looking to take out the fuel tank, I think, on that truck. Then another one comes in, bang, and then another, and it's interesting how many drones they use to take out all of these different pieces of equipment. But then I guess that's what you'd expect. These drones are going to be, a fiber optic might be a little more expensive. You might be looking at $400 to $500 worth of drone, and they are taking out a whole logistics garage here of all sorts of equipment. So yeah, sometimes I think I could show you so much footage, but then it's all kind of samey. And then sometimes I'm like, you're just fascinated watching these drones like fly around hangars and blow stuff up. Okay, Mikhailo Fedorov, who's like your technical innovation science guy, Vice Prime Minister of Innovations, Development of Education, Science and Technologies, Minister of Digital Transformation. That was it, Minister of Digital Transformation. So you're talking about the Brave One again. So that's the I'm not quite sure. Brave One seems to be getting used as a term for all sorts of different aspects. So it must be it's definitely this platform where you can get equipment with the points that you've accrued for being successful on the front line. It works as a kind of Amazon for equipment, so that you can have a centralized procurement, I guess, access point. But I think Brave One is also bigger than that. But anyway, a new type of weapon from Brave One, Ukraine Defense Innovations participant, a Brave One participant, has been tested on the front lines. The result: an enemy stronghold was destroyed by a munition weighing more than 100 kilograms. Right, this is a phenomenally heavy bit of kit. So a TM62, so anti-tank mine, those round ones are heavy. That's kind of 9 to 10 kilograms of weight. So you've got, I presume, a drone being able to carry a munition of 100 kilograms. I presume that's an aerial drone, but it might be a UGV being spotted by an aerial drone. I don't know. There's not a lot of information here. More solutions are coming soon, and the enemy will experience their full force. So they are, obviously there's an element of PR here, but there is innovation going on, as you would expect. And a 100 kilogram explosion is a significant explosion. And I'm pretty sure that has been delivered remotely somehow. So yeah, watch this space type thing. Right. Jürgen Nailed talks about the Iskander strike. Yes, so some people saying these weren't Iskanders, they're MLRS or this or that. But the Ukrainians are claiming very much that these were Iskanders that were loaded up, ready to go in possibly advance of yesterday's or last night's strikes. In fact, this, as some people say, Iskander facility, these launches being struck. And also there was something taken out at Bryansk airfield, which caused a massive explosion. There were theories that was another Iskander site, and that would have definitely been ready to attack for last night because there was a huge wave of missiles and drones sent into Ukraine as a response to the Operation Spiderweb, etc. So Jürgen nailed it. The Iskander facilities destroyed by Ukraine today were intended to be part of the Russian response to Kyiv. What is known about these facilities in today's attack, according to open sources, each of the components' 6 missile carries 480 kilograms of explosives. That is an extremely impressive and expensive weapon. These missiles were designed to hit strategically important targets, airfields and headquarters. So it's interesting, 480 kilograms, and we've just been talking about 100 kilograms. So 480 kilograms delivered by a missile that costs $1 to $2 million. I wonder whether... So if that's, say, let's go at the upper end, though. 2 million, only because the maths is easier. Well, actually, so $2 million. Then if this is, I don't know, fifth quarter, it's 4.5 times less weight of explosives. You've got 100 kilograms compared to 480, actually, so 4.8. You would expect like this to equivalently be, I guess, $400,000 worth of kit, somewhere between $200,000 to $400,000 worth of kit, to be comparable to that ballistic missile. So I wonder how much this costs to develop, how much those explosives are. I'm presuming it's going to be way less than that, way less, and that's the value of using something like this, where you can get, yeah, okay, you can't fire it the distance that you're talking about with a ballistic missile, but if you can get 4 of these explosions taking place at a facility, and actually in different places, so 4 or 5 100 kilogram explosions around a particular facility rather than one 480 kilogram explosion at one point, you can possibly convey a bit of an advantage by using these, but obviously the range is going to be inhibited and they might be easier to defend against. So just playing around with ideas here. This is an extremely impressive and expensive weapon, the Iskander. The Iskander M. These missiles were designed to hit strategically important targets, airfields and headquarters, with an official range of up to 500 kilometers. As previously reported by the General Staff, one facility was completely destroyed. Its ammunition detonated. The other 2 facilities are believed to have sustained significant damage as a result of the explosions. Russia lost tens of millions of dollars as one missile cost $1 to $2 million, and the entire complex cost $30 to $40 million. So that happened ahead of last night's attacks. And then we heard this before we get on to last night's attacks, that reserve diesel locomotive derailed in the Prokhorovsky district, that's in Belgorod. According to preliminary information, it was caused by an explosive device placed under the rails. There are no casualties. Train traffic was delayed for 2.5 hours, but now all trains are running according to schedule. Part of the railway track is damaged. The repair crew has begun to restore the damaged section of the track. So still continues to be partisan sabotage activity taking place over the border in these various places. That was Belgorod. We've had Bryansk and Kursk previously with regard to the rail network. Right, now moving on to the big response from Russia. And it was pretty horrific last night on the one hand. But on the other hand, you would if you could. You aren't, so you can't. Right? You know what I always say. And when we look at cruise missile numbers here, I'm going to see if I can move my head. There you go. Cruise missile numbers. We have how many were shot down? We have 30 out of 36 were shot down. 2 Iskander-K cruiser missiles at 32, and actually pretty good results on shooting ballistic missiles down, 4 out of 6. So you've got 36 cruise missiles there. And when you compare that to 112 being the record of what was shot down, then you actually have a very low number of missiles sent. So if this was the major response from Kyiv, I think we can be pretty confident that the Operation Spiderweb the other day did have a tangible effect on Russia's ability to fire cruise missiles. A lot of these would have come from the Black Sea, possibly. You've got the submarines and warships out there that can fire them, and then the other strategic bombers that are left. Maybe the ballistic missiles were sent from ground launch systems. So really only you're talking in the 30s of what was shot down, and in fact what was sent, 36, 38, 39. Okay, so 39 probably air-launched cruise missiles. That isn't hugely impressive. Now, they did quite a lot of damage, so it's all horrific and etc., etc. But on a scale of, 0 to the worst of the war, this wasn't the worst of the war by a long shot. In fact, there were plenty and plenty of, every single entry onto this sheet that's above 40, and remember the beginning of the war they weren't calculated accurately, so I would start the war from here, start what we're looking at from here. All of these times across there where you've got higher bars were worse than last night, and actually considerably worse. So really anything above this kind of line just below there. Okay, so let's look at some of the stats. With regard to drones, obviously, it's a very different picture. The Russians are sending huge numbers of drones into Ukraine, and that is something that they need to deal with. They struck 13 cities last night. 367 out of the 407 drones were intercepted in some way. 199 shot down, 169 suppressed by electronic warfare, and actually that's not too bad. So previously we were seeing sort of 30 odd out of 100 getting through. We've essentially been seeing a third recently of drones get through, and there was 30 odd out of 407 that got through. That is 4 times better than what we are used to seeing. So actually last night was a pretty good night for intercepting Russian drones. 368 out of 407. You guys can do the maths there. And then 4 out of 6 Iskander M's is pretty decent, and not too bad with the cruise missile interceptions as well, but some significantly did get through. We'll see them. Okay, now I don't know about this. I've not seen too much of this mentioned anywhere else. There were these circulating videos last night of supposedly an Oreshnik breaking up in the sky, being sent towards Ukraine and then breaking up. But then Greg on the live stream last night was saying no, he reckons that was a video of a meteor shower, but it was doing the rounds, and I've still seen it this morning. So there is a claim that an Oreshnik broke up over in the skies over, I don't know, near the border somewhere. Here, Ukraine Frontline says the bastards launched 2 Oreshnik missiles at Kyiv. 1 at the Bankova, 2 at the Kyiv Dam with the Kyiv hydroelectric power plant. Both fell on the border with Kazakhstan. It was planned that the Shaheds who are flying now would finish off, and the Aerospace Forces aviation, plus the planned launches of Iskanders and S-300, 400 would complete the bloody attack, but everything again went wrong. I don't know about this, but that is a claim that's out there. Just, a pinch of salt and all that. Right, okay. Tim White has 2 extensive threads on what happened, going right through last night and then right through this morning. He started it again in the middle of the night. Drones are flying. Lutsk was targeted, which is over in further to the west. Huge explosion at Bryansk airport. We're going to come to the Russian, the targets inside Russia in a wee while. Huge explosion there in Kyiv. You can see falling right in amongst what looks like civilian infrastructure. Thick smoke seen rising in Kiev as the first sun throws its light on the capital. All missiles had stopped flying by about 7 hours ago. Yeah, explosions, as you can see there, really significant explosion inside Kiev. What is amazing when we have these huge explosions in the cities is I always think that there are going to be far more casualties than there are. So it's testament to either like people getting down into the metros, or just like massive explosions and big fireballs don't always translate into huge destruction of infrastructure. It depends where they hit and how they hit and what they hit, and etc., etc. What else do we have before we get onto more like explicit images? Not explicit images, explicitly concentrating on images and videos. Russia attacked with hundreds of drones, Kiev districts that were attacked, fires in an apartment block, metal hangar, cars damaged, debris fell. So there will be a lot of debris falling, because obviously 407 drones being sent in is gonna, what goes up must come down. That everything that gets shot down will cause an explosion or damage below, and you're hoping that they get shot down out in the fields and whatnot, but that's not going to happen all the time, obviously. So lots of fires all around, significant damage being done. One more target that Russia has hit, a plant producing. Oh, that's in Russia. We're going to come to that. So yeah, lots of damage done last night, but all things considered, I think it wasn't the worst of nights that Ukraine might have might have experienced, and that could be due to the Ukrainians taking out those Iskander missile sites. So so last night, this is a kind of typical image you would have seen: people in the metros, fires in Kiev. So some really significant images, significant events taking place in mainly Kiev, Lutsk, and also Ternopil, from what I can gather. I think maybe Poltava we're hearing about a little bit later as well. But as I said, there were 13 cities that the General Staff said were hit or were targeted. So yeah, ballistic sounds in Kiev, loads of drones in the airspace over the time last night. Poltava and Chernihiv report explosions during the ballistic missile attack. There you've got another hit directly in the middle of an apartment block. That's in Kiev. Really typical. It's very easy to say that the Russians are targeting civilian blocks like this, and they might be, but also there's a very high probability these are taken out with electronic warfare or through air defenses, hitting their wings or whatever, or could be a malfunction. So there are lots of other explanations, but when you are throwing hundreds of drones over over cities like Kiev, this is going to happen. So it's just, I think it's completely unacceptable. Anyway, obviously the whole war is completely unacceptable. Right, okay, so Russia strikes Kiev, Ukraine in a major attack, says Clash report. Russia launched one of its heaviest air assaults on the war, hitting Kiev, Lutsk and other Ukrainian cities with drones, cruise and ballistic missiles. Kiev was struck repeatedly overnight, 4 dead and 20 plus injured. Fires and destruction in the residential areas. Now, 3 of the dead, as far as I'm aware, are firefighters who were dealing with the damage that was being done. Metro service was disrupted as missiles damaged key infrastructure. Lutsk hit by 15 drones, 6 missiles. Schools, homes and government buildings were damaged. Strikes followed Ukraine's June 1st drone attack on Russian bomber bases. Putin had promised retaliation after a June 4th call with Trump. So lots of pretty insane footage that you can see. Russians pouring missiles randomly into residential buildings in several Ukrainian cities last night, says Jay in Kiev. Is there anything more disgusting than Russia? So, there are these justifiably angry posts about civilian infrastructure being targeted and damaged. 4 people killed, more than 20 injured again, says Anton Gerashenko. Residential buildings, subway tracks, Civilian infrastructure objects damaged, electricity blackouts in some areas, and a transportation collapse in the morning due to part of the subway being closed. I mean, that is some pretty pretty staggering footage there of an explosion in the side of that building in Kiev. Now, sadly, in Kiev, 3 Ukrainian state emergency service rescuers were killed while responding to the aftermath of Russian strikes. They worked under fire to save lives. 9 more were injured, some critically, and doctors are fighting for them. In Ternopil region, 5 rescuers were also injured. So Ternopil has a big old explosion there. Now, horrific footage of Russian strikes in Lutsk and Ternopil last night. According to preliminary information, Russia launched 15 drones, 6 missiles at Lutsk. It's known about 15 people were injured. This is some pretty incredible footage, this. So I will show. I won't have the sound on because you get into trouble. But that is I will almost certainly have a restricted status for this video. You can see there the missiles coming in. Now, the trajectory of those missiles coming in isn't massively steep. I mean, that one is steeper, but actually the speed, although it looks quite fast, that is cruise missile speed. If it's a ballistic missile, that would be going a lot faster. So these look like they are definitely cruise missiles that are hitting here, which is a shame because cruise missiles are easier to take out, to intercept than ballistic missiles. So as they come to their terminal phase, so a cruise missile will be flying fairly low. And when it comes into a terminal phase, sometimes they can rise up before coming into a terminal much steeper phase. To give them extra sort of kinetic energy and make them harder to hit. So that seems to be what's happening there. We have civilian infrastructure was damaged, including a furniture workshop and repair facilities. This is in state emergency services reported rescues and police evacuated people from a damaged 9-story building. Civilian infrastructure was damaged, including a furniture workshop and repair facilities, hotel Motor, where Ukrainian national team athletes were participating in the team championship in Lutsk, was hit. Fortunately, there were no casualties or injuries among the athletes. And indeed, this is I believe these are the athletes. And this is, you can see all the windows blown out and all sorts. Russia attacked Ternopil with drones and caliber missiles. 10 people got injured, including 5 employees of the state emergency services. Industrial facilities, infrastructure were hit. Part of Ternopil is without electricity. Harmful substances in the city air above normal levels. So who knows what was hit there. Really horrible images of explosions and whatnot. Now, this was interesting, and I had reported on this, I don't know, ages ago, where we had started to learn about adaptations to Russia's cruise missiles, where they had these kind of little holes in them that shoot out, as you can see here, sort of chaff or whatever that is. Russian KH-101 cruise missile deploys heat-seeking decoys before striking in Lutsk. So they do actually have. So when I said cruise missiles are easier to shoot down than ballistic missiles, they have developed defensive capabilities for their cruise missiles to give them a better chance of not being taken down by at least heat-seeking air defense missiles. What else? Russia launched a cruise missile directly into a residential building in Lutsk tonight. So it doesn't look like those cruise missiles were intercepted or had electronic warfare working on them. And so, what's going on when they hit a residential building? Well, then you've got circle error probable. So these precision guided munitions still don't, it's not like they're going to hit on a sixpence 100% of the time, although that's certainly for Western weapons, that is the intention. Although it's interesting that that Pete Hegseth at the DoD is kind of scaling back the, well, I won't go down that route, but he was kind of getting rid of the JAGs, the lawyers, and then implying that the ethics of trying to minimize collateral is not their number one priority going forward, or something like that. But anyway, generally speaking, Western weapons, because you don't want that collateral, it does become, other than merely ethical considerations, such as we don't want to kill civilians because it's bad. But actually, from a PR point of view, it becomes problematic if you're using these weapons and then, 50% of the time they're going into somewhere nearby that happens to be a civilian area, then that's highly controversial. So it's in your best interest for efficiency, for ethics, and for PR to make sure that your missiles are as precise as possible. Russia's missiles appear to be not as precise, but they don't particularly care. So they didn't care about the PR, they don't care about the ethics, and it doesn't appear that they care that much about the efficiency. So they seem to be happy enough just building more missiles and sending them in. And so this could be that the missile was aiming at something vaguely nearby, maybe an industrial area that builds, I don't know, engines or something. And then it's gone into this building, not because it's been sent off track or anything like that, but merely because circle error probable says if you've got a 100-meter or 300-meter circle error probable, it means 50% of the time it needs to hit within that 300 meters, right? But then 50% of the time it can go outside. So, these missiles, although they're labeled as precision guided missiles, aren't always precise. So yeah, right. So here's that footage I was telling you about. This is the Ukrainian national track and field team under fire in Lutsk. Ternopil as well suffered. There's an image from an explosion in Ternopil. Interesting that Operation Spiderweb might well have had this effect that I was telling you about previously. Says this source, 15 aircraft would perform launch maneuvers in the air. There are 4 planes now. I wonder where the rest are. And then you're seeing, oh, right, there's only 30-odd cruise missiles compared to in the mid-hundreds previously. When there have been the biggest attacks that we've seen. And you would have thought last night should have been the biggest attack, considering Ukraine's hits on Russia were that devastating in terms of the PR. And yet they managed a handful of ballistic missiles and, under 40 cruise missiles. And yet the claims are that they've upped their ballistic missile production by 60-70%. They've upped their, production of all of these kinds of munitions, yet unable to fire that many. But you can have all the missiles you like. If you don't have the planes to fire them, it becomes a bit more challenging. Right, here we have a statement from fighter bomber, very accurate potentially Russian pilot associated with the Russian aviation here, saying, I wrote a sheet of text based on our responses 6 times, but erased them all. I decided to write a shorter one. If today's strike was our response to at least 4 terrorist attacks and a destruction of strategists, then it was worthless. So fighter bomber is saying, if last night's, and they look pretty horrific and the visuals are bad, but as I say, you got 40 odd missiles. If that was our response to those 4 big, as he calls them, terrorist attacks, then that's worthless. If this was the maximum we are capable of without using nuclear weapons, then we need to stop putting bast shoes on our C words. I don't know, that's obviously a Russian saying, and hitting them with nuclear weapons, wiping out enemy cities one by one, as long as we are able to do this, or at least prohibit the formulation, this is our answer. This is with a palm on the P word. So I don't know, another saying that. So what he's saying is basically we need to either use nuclear weapons or stop saying that this is our response. Because if you're claiming this is our response, then it's embarrassing. So just do this, but don't big it up. Or, scarily, he is advocating using nuclear weapons. Because that response last night was woefully inadequate as far as he's concerned. Keith Kellogg's daughter is in Kiev, and I like this. I don't like the fact that she's, scared and experiencing an air raid. But she says, loud night in Kiev, Dad. So is she a humanitarian worker, Keith Kellogg's daughter? It might be the explosions and gunfire in the dead of the night, but I get the strange feeling the Russians don't want peace. Ouch. She also says multiple Ukrainian cities are under attack. Russia wants you to believe it's striking back, but Ukraine's precision strikes occurred in response to relentless Russian attacks on civilians and only after Putin refused a ceasefire. He only wants more war and all of Ukraine. I love this. This is telling her father, who's the envoy to Ukraine, they're not interested in peace. And do you know how I know this? Because I'm freaking experiencing it right now. So that's what Russia did last night. Then Ukraine supposedly, according to drone, is it Drone Bomber, does these images showing that Crimea was largely attacked. Have absolutely no news of anything being hit in Crimea. So there's such a lack of BDA, lack of images, lack of information coming out from Ukraine strikes these days. I keep saying it every day, like, why is this? But anyway, a lot of activity going into Kursk and Bryansk, north of the border. A lot of activity towards Voronezh and over in this direction. So this direction is towards Saratov there, right? So a lot of these red arrows are going to be drones moving towards Saratov. What's at Saratov? There's Engels 2, air bases. You've got some oil depots and all sorts there. So there was supposedly, according to Visioner here, at this very moment, over 400 Ukrainian kamikaze drones are flying towards Russia. Now, you saw 400 drones going into Ukraine and 30-odd missiles, and we saw all of those videos and images of huge explosions. We have relatively little coming from Russia with a similar sort of attack. But we do actually have some images, and certainly of the aftermath today at Saratov. Okay, so Max25 says Michurinsk, the progress plant was hit. Engels oil depot, that's where we've got the most impressive imagery. And that's interesting because oil depots have been off limits recently, and Ukraine hitting an oil depot last night must mean that energy infrastructure is back on the cards. I think there was an unwritten agreement that they would not strike each other's energy infrastructure, because Ukraine was doing an amazing job of doing that previously, and then it suddenly stopped. And now last night again, military airfield at Dyagilevo in Ryazan was also hit. So the Ukrainians were busy last night. And it started with this. So I was doing a live with Greg Terry. We were talking about Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And Greg was like, there's been a massive explosion in Bryansk. So the armed forces of Ukraine have just destroyed reportedly ballistic missile launchers. So if that is true, and there are claims that these are ballistic missile launchers, claims that there was aviation blown up here, claims that there was ammunition blown up here, lots of claims, don't know exactly what was blown up, but something significant definitely was blown up, because my goodness, there was some big old clouds going on. Now, the armed forces of Ukraine has just destroyed reportedly ballistic missile launches in Bryansk. If it was a case of ballistic missiles being destroyed, then that would have also impeded the Russians from sending even more ballistic missiles. So not only did we have earlier in that day, in the morning, Bryansk again, wasn't it, where you had ballistic missile launchers hit, Iskander launchers hit, and that's because Bryansk is closest to Kyiv in terms of which. If we're going to go back to here, Kyiv is over here. There's Sumy, Kharkiv. Kyiv is over left of the picture. Bryansk is, so you've got Voronezh, Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk over here. And that is much closer to Kyiv. So this is where you're going to get most of your Iskander ballistic missile launches. So that could be two sets of Iskander launches taken out, and that will have affected the number of ballistic missiles sent into Ukraine last night. Now, here's some more spectacular footage from that explosion from Bryansk airfield, their airport. More footage of explosions at the Bryansk airport in Russia. The airport itself has been closed for civilian travel when Russia launched a full-scale invasion back in 2022, so it's not a civilian airport. Hasn't been for 3 years. But it's obviously going to be used by the military, right? And that is one big old explosion there. So what else do we hear? Here is is this a Russian? Yes, so this is a Russian source. Yet another Iskander installation has indeed been destroyed. There is a secondary detonation and characteristic white smoke from the rocket fuel. Apparently, the servicemen prepared everything for a massive strike on the expletive for Ukraine, or slang word for Ukrainians, but the order from PIPA never came, and the Ukrainians managed to copy the location of the installations. This is such a disgrace. So Russians here, not fans of the fact that they are getting ballistic missile installations getting blown up. Then, in addition to the strike on the Dyagilevo strategic airbase, Ukrainians Also targeted the Kristall oil depot in Russia's Saratov region, which supplies aviation fuel to the Engels strategic air base. And here we have another angle. Ukrainian drone swarms are attacking Saratov, Engels and Ryazan. Saratov oil refinery on fire. That Jagiellovo airbase in Ryazan is not the airport we were just looking at, by the way. So that's another separate strike. Now, it's actually now a pretty significant fire at Engels, and it's growing. This, I presume, it's been hit previously, as you can see there. Some very burnt oil depot tanks there. Let's have a look at that. So that is a significant fire. That is at the Engels oil depot, which, and look, you can see there. So by all accounts, I think there are 3 separate tanks that are on fire there now. And the good news from a Ukrainian point of view is that they are at different ends of that depot. So, you know, there's a chance of that spreading kind of in different directions and more tanks getting taken out, and that's going to be more difficult for the Russians to deal with. It's not all at one point in the depot there. So that's a significant burnage going on. And here's another angle. Russian media report a drone attack and explosions on the oil refinery at Engels. I don't know that it is a refinery. It certainly is a depot. Let's look at the satellite image again and see. Yeah, it looks like a depot. That's not a refinery. Often, you know, when English isn't their first language, it gets used interchangeably. Now, this is interesting. Someone who's at Max25 saying this is Russian electronic warfare, which is quite amusing, because what happens here is a drone flies into a pylon. I don't think, well, maybe it was intended, but I don't know that it would be intended. I don't know the value of hitting a pylon. Obviously, it's valuable to take out energy infrastructure. But what I'm saying is I don't know how easy they are to repair. I can't imagine they would be easy to repair. Pylons there's pretty complex. Or maybe it's not. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure some expert in the threads can let me know. It's a bit like railways, where you think, oh yeah, blow up some railways, but actually it's really easy to repair railways. What you want to do is blow up a bridge. That's much more difficult with a railway on it. So anyway, this is a drone that flies directly into a pylon, and there is one massive explosion, very bright, as you'd imagine, electric explosion there. So may have been something that was intended, may not. That is in Saratov Engels area as well. Ukrainians have struck the Jagiellovo strategic aviation base, and that seems to be a pretty nice explosion going on there. It located in Russia's Ryazan region. Powerful explosions were reported at the scene there. So this is, again, good news for the Ukrainians. Michurinsk, Tambov region, another video surfaced showing the aftermath of a strike at the Progress plant. This facility produces advanced control systems for aviation and missile technology, as well as a wide range of civilian electronics and equipment for gas and oil infrastructure. That's going to be a useful place to have struck as well. Podolsk in Moscow region has been hit, it seems, or at least there's fire happening there. I have no idea what that's all about, but I presume something's been hit. And indeed, Ukrainian drones have struck the town of Podolsk in the Moscow region, only 35 kilometers from the Red Square, as well as Jagiellovo Air Base. I don't know if that is something that's been sent off course and then has landed. I don't know. I don't know what's been hit. But anyway, there are videos of Podolsk on fire and potentially Jagiellovo. Then this is from Jimmy Russian. I think this sums it up pretty well. When you look at like the fire coming out of the Saratov, the Engels oil depot, Russian drones hit apartment blocks in Kyiv, and we've seen plenty of imagery of that today. Ukrainian drones hit strategic targets inside Russia, a familiar pattern. Now, Mike Eckel here says Ukraine launched more than 170 drones at Russian targets overnight. So we've had the claim of 400 drones, we've got a claim of 170. A lot of drones, we know, for sure. Now, here, Pastor Mark Burns. So I've included this because this is great. Pastor Mark Burns was someone, you know, he's a religious advisor to Donald Trump. He went out to Ukraine, saw stuff, met people. experienced Ukraine and came back a changed man. And he is among the kind of religious right in the United States, the kind of in amongst the MAGA. He is being a great communicator and advocate on behalf of Ukraine. And so when last night you have videos like this.
Oh, fuck. Holy shit.
Right, I've been there. That is right next to Hotel Ukrainska. The guys who are with me will know, they know these flags. This person has got in the memorial, I forget what the actual, this little, it's not a garden, but it's right in the middle of Kiev here. So the fact that you've got air defenses going off right in the middle of Kiev is pretty incredible. I mean, she should be very nearby, is a metro station just over there, basically. There's the famous column up there. This is happening right in the center. So Mark Burns saying Kiev is under attack again right now. At this moment by Russian forces whose aim is to kill and terrorize civilians. I'm not a warmonger, but I will fight for the innocent women and children who have nothing to do with this Russian war. Cover them in Jesus' name. Now, I'm no religious person as well, you know, but it's really good when you get this kind of rhetoric coming from someone who might otherwise have been advocating really for Russia. And he's quite open about how he's kind of changed his tune with regard to the war in Ukraine, which is why more people need to visit Ukraine. I really get annoyed when people like Alex Jones or whatever are sounding off. He had a debate with Drew Pavlou online the other day about Ukraine, and he's just spouting nonsense after nonsense. And Drew Pavlou is like, I've been to Ukraine, I've experienced this, why are you arguing these emotional appeals? It is emotional when civilians get killed, when firefighters die trying to save these people's lives. And when Ukraine are targeting strategic targets, and Russia just doesn't seem to care about human life, whether it be their own soldiers or Ukrainian citizens. So, I think this is good rhetoric there. Now, although some people are showing this video as representing strikes last night, this was actually 2 nights ago, and it was in Kharkiv. I just corrected someone saying that was claiming this was Kiev last night. So this is apparently Kharkiv 2 nights ago. Horrific footage from Ukraine's city of Kharkiv last night, as in 2 nights because this was yesterday morning, as Russians indiscriminately target populated high-rise buildings. I just wanted to, this has been happening every night, right? Last night was it was more significant than the night before, but this kind of stuff happens to some degree every single night. And here you've got civilian buildings being destroyed. So Richard Woodruff talks about this footage, and as you can see, that's a civilian building it's an apartment block, having something blow up on top of it. I've got a game for you all, says Richard Woodruff. Actually, someone I want to interview. He's out there. This is Kharkiv. How many military bases can you count being hit by Russian kamikaze drones? Now, how many residential apartment complexes can you see being hit? That's the difference between them and us. They are brain dead scum, genocidal scum. So he's obviously, very angry with them. But the point is completely salient that the Russians do not care for civilian life, and they don't care for adhering to international rules of war. Now, this is from a couple of days ago. The crew of a Mi-24 helicopter there, I think they're the ones with the cannons right on the nose of the helicopter, shooting down a Russian kamikaze drone, Shahed 136, in the sky over Ukraine with fire from an onboard cannon. So that's pretty cool footage. What else do we have? Yeah, so sad. So I reported yesterday on the administrative building in Kherson being hit. Looks like it was hit again. You had the missing bit there, unless that's a different side of it. But it really fundamentally destroyed that building. And Zarina Zabritsky I think, has she left Kherson now? Or she's certainly been there and done this documentary. I am hoping to speak to her. She was like, this building meant a lot to me. It had the nice sort of trident on the top there. So Kherson, the building of the regional state administration, says Zelensky. Russian forces have completely destroyed it. 2 strikes with aerial bombs, deliberate strikes, not accidental, no military sense whatsoever. They're openly destroying life. Absolutely deranged creatures. I'm so with him here. Force is needed to make them stop destroying and killing. Everyone in the world clearly sees who exactly has such force, yet still isn't using it for the sake of peace. Unfortunately, isn't using it. I thank everyone in the world who's helping change that and bring real security closer for our people. Again, this is, and this, as he says, is a deliberate targeting. This isn't something going skew, isn't interfered with by electronic warfare. This is the accurate precision guided glide bombing of an administrative building. So this is like your council building. This is how the city operates for and on behalf of the civilians, by the civilians. This is not a military target. This is a war crime. There you go. Now, I wanted to just add this one in. I just love this because I keep saying that you can't use the parts of many of these airplanes that were blown up in the air bases that were struck by those drones recently because there's just dust left. And this new hobbyist scale model of a 295, I just absolutely love this. A couple of bits left there, but mainly the scale model of dust. So anyway, just thought I'd share that with you. And then as a result of Operation Spiderweb, as Jakub Janovsky says, this is just very funny. This is Interfax, so the Russian media, state media here, saying the Kremlin would like the world community to strongly condemn Ukraine's attacks on Russian airfields. Meanwhile, the world community, apart from the United States, is going, yay, let's do it. By the United States, I mean the Trump administration. We're just all going, yay, this is awesome. Thank you very much. That's what you deserve, you bastards. So, no, we're not going to strongly condemn it, you bunch of muppets. Okay. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. I told you it's going to be another long one today. Right, due to the sanctions by the EU on 189 tankers that carry Russian oil. So this is EU sanctions that were updated for the 17th round of sanctions. As a result of then, shipping of oil dropped by 28.6% for the week May 26th to June 1st compared to the previous week, down to 352,000 tonnes a day. Now, Friedrich Merz went to Trump yesterday to ask for cooperation on sanctions, and Trump said, I've got a date in my head of when sanctions might happen, but he indicated it's going to happen on both sides. So he was going to sanction Ukraine for being invaded. The guy is nuts. Donald Trump is an evil human being as far as I'm concerned. I'm just whatever, and if you want to defend him, good luck, mate. It's not going to touch the sides with me. All right, Russian Coast Guard's sailors are being sent to Ukraine to serve as stormtroopers, according to relatives of the men. It's unclear whether this new policy is to make up for manpower shortages or is being done to punish the individual men in question. The mother of one of these men, a sailor named Ivan Krichny, has recorded a video message to the Russian authorities appealing for her son to be returned to normal duty with the Coast Guards. She says that Ivan was about 15 other men were transferred to assault units without warning, without official documentation or explanations. Quote, without any reason, without any order that is given in person, without any notification, they threw my child to the training ground and transferred him to assault units. There are 15 of them on the training ground. They removed the guys from all the Coast Guard units. The men were told they had been transferred for being troublemakers. However, Natalia said that Ivan did not have any disciplinary problems, but had just returned from leave, had received commendations, and had been awarded the Order of Veteran of Combat Operations. Quote, we don't know who gave such an order. The order was given, they say, from the ministry, but who distributed it? All the murderers are walking around, and those who are doing their duty normally, conscientiously, were just thrown into the training ground. End quote. The relatives were given brochures stating that the Coast Guard fighters do not participate in combat operations and are not transferred to the front, but according to Natalia, in fact, they were deceived and sent to the front lines without explanation. The relatives are now desperately trying to get clear explanations and get their children back before they're sent to the front lines. Natalia appeals to the relatives to unite and not allow the servicemen to be sent to the front lines without justification or training. Quote, they just took them and assigned them to the assault groups. They are now at the training ground. We don't know how to help them. The Russian Coast Guard played a predominantly defensive role in the war in Ukraine, mainly patrolling Crimean waters. The Coast Guard does not appear to have participated in combat operations other than a Ukrainian attack on one of the bases in Crimea in July 2024. It's very unusual to see a report of Coast Guard personnel apparently being used as ground troops. Okay, African media reports that by the end of May and the beginning of June, Ukrainian military intelligence was behind the attacks on bases of the Malian junta forces, which are backed by Russia. According to the reports, Ukrainian operatives are training and arming the attackers and are directly participating in field operations. These attacks have resulted in the deaths of over 100 Malian soldiers, and there are also reports of Russian advisors being killed. So we know that Wagner and Russians are very active in Sudan, in Mali, and indeed, you've got Ukrainians supporting the Tuareg rebels and, active in Sudan. You're wondering what they're doing there and why they're not in Ukraine fighting. But of course, Russia derives a lot of its income from operations in Africa. And the Ukrainians want to stop that money, want to stop that Russian security provision success in Africa, so that kind of blood money or whatever doesn't get back to Russia. So it is completely justifiable, in my opinion. Right, Telegram, the messaging app, may face a potential ban in Russia in the coming months, according to the Russian media. Recently, Putin ordered the government to integrate public services into a domestic messaging app with an interface resembling Telegram. President Donald Trump compared the war in Ukraine to a crazy fight between two little kids in a park, adding, "Sometimes you need to let them fight a bit before you pull them apart." I talked about that both with Greg Terry last night on the live, but also did a whole video on the interaction with Merz. It was an absolute disaster. Donald Trump is a complete fool. Now, Friedrich Merz, unfortunately, I don't think he was ever going to, told reporters that both he and Trump favoured stopping the war soon. And I told the president before we came in that he's a key person in the world who can really do that by putting pressure on Russia. But unfortunately, nothing came of it, essentially. Trump made no promises of such pressure, and he made no concrete commitments to provide weapons or back sanctions, either publicly or privately, with Merz. I'm hoping that the Senate might take the Elon Musk and Donald Trump fracas as giving a permission structure for people to be critical of Trump or to not toe the party line with regard to Trump's agenda. So the big, beautiful bill is actually quite controversial, and a lot of Republicans are not a fan of putting $4 trillion on the debt ceiling and trillions on the actual debt. They're not a fan of that. And so there is going to be a movement now because of what Musk did yesterday and tying Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. This is really important, by the way. This is super, super, super important, almost like the most important thing I'm going to say all day, because if the US can get that bill through, the Lindsey Graham bill through, then suddenly the US is back in the game and Russia's in a lot of trouble. So the Musk scenario could give a permission structure for people to vote against the big, beautiful bill, the budget reconciliation bill. And that then gives them a permission structure from a Republican point of view, to start pushing things like support for Ukraine. And Lindsey Graham Blumenthal's bill might get through because there's chaos in the government and people have been given permission to be either overtly critical of Trump, or start to push the envelope in getting their own agenda through and not just adhering to everything that Trump wants to do to the letter. Because it's all kind of exploded. New York Post, the Murdoch tabloid that is very, very pro-Republican, but is also quite pro-Ukraine, weirdly enough. Shouldn't be weird, but it is. This is their whole front page. I hate my ex being Twitter here. With big, beautiful breakup, Trump-Elon bromance explodes into insults, threats. I'm hoping, and Greg Terry was saying last night, that this could be good news for Ukraine. You could find a contrived way that Ukraine benefits from this chaos. And it could be that Graham Blumenthal bill, the Senate bill, goes through Congress as a result of this. That's my fingers crossed scenario. Just a random here. I love the fact that Free Azov, so the Azov are still captured. Many of them are still prisoners of war after they surrendered at the Azovstal plant in Mariupol, the heroic defense of Mariupol. Many of them are still captured, and every Sunday in Kiev there's a Free Azov rally. I've been to one of them, and here it's just great to see on a Amsterdam skate park an awesome bit of graffiti there, Free Azov. So that's cool. Now, I almost showed you this the other day. Here, Dimko Zhlitenko, I'm going to interview him in the next couple of days, says Russians are stuffing dead bunnies with explosives and dropping them on Ukrainian positions. There are more pictures than this as well. They've got pictures of them gutting the bunny. What the F is this level of cruelty? So I don't understand why they do, like, this is just horror. There's no functional reason for doing this other than these pictures to kind of show how horrible they are. I don't really know. Like, it's not like you're disguising anything. These are being dropped from drones, and they put explosives inside a gutted bunny. Just horrific. But on a nicer level, birds are now using, near the front lines, fibre optic cabling to weave their nests because there's so much of it bloody lying around. Photo here from the 12th Azov Brigade of a bird's nest partly made with fibre optic cabling. So, yeah, nature has a way. Right, thanks for that. It's been a long one because crazy times. Really appreciate your support. I really, really do. Thank you and take care.